had once thought that silence was the only way to protect both of us. Until the day Kieran vanished from my life, without an explanation, without a goodbye, and left me with words that were never spoken, touches that never happened, and a truth that we had chosen to bury together. If I had spoken up sooner, maybe everything would have been different. But this story doesn't start with a tragedy. It begins in a very ordinary place. The campus of a university in America, where thousands of students pass by each other every day, carrying dreams, secrets, and fears they dare not name. I am Zane, and Kieran, he was the only one who made me realize that sometimes the most painful thing isn't rejection, but never giving yourself the chance to speak the truth. I met Kieran in a class I wasn't supposed to attend. That day I had planned to skip. I was tired, my mind blank, and my college life felt like an endless loop of meaningless days. But I still walked into the lecture hall, 5 minutes late, and that was the moment everything started veering off my safe track. The social psychology class was packed. I froze at the door, my heart pounding from the stares of hundreds of strangers. I was about to turn away when someone looked back. Kieran. His eyes met mine. Not for long, but deep enough. He pulled his backpack off the empty seat next to him, a decisive motion, as if he'd already decided. "Sit here," Kieran said. Just 2 words. I don't know why I remember that voice so clearly. Deep, calm, and somehow cautious. I sat down, acutely aware that the distance between us was now measured in centimeters. The lecture that day was about human behavior, about how we hide ourselves to fit into society. I didn't catch more than half of what the professor said, because I was too aware of the person sitting next to me. Kieran's arm rested close to mine, not touching, but close enough that I couldn't pretend I didn't feel it. After class, we walked out together. It was fall, the wind cold, golden leaves covering the paths. I don't remember who started the conversation first. I just remember that it flowed naturally in a frightening way. From small talk, we shifted to more personal topics faster than I expected. "Have you ever felt like you're playing someone else's role?" Kieran asked me as we stood in front of the library. I paused. That question didn't seem like one for new acquaintances. "I think everyone does," I replied, choosing the safest answer. Kieran looked at me, a sad smile flickering in his eyes. "Yeah, maybe." From that day, we started appearing in each other's lives more than necessary. Studying together, eating together, sitting in silence in the library for hours without it feeling awkward. But there was one thing we never mentioned. Not because we didn't notice, but because we were both afraid. Afraid that if we said it, everything would crumble. Afraid that if we admitted it, we couldn't go back to being friends. Afraid that the truth that I wanted him, and maybe he wanted me too, would expose parts of us we weren't ready to face. There were evenings when it was just the 2 of us in my room, the lights dim and the sound of cars outside, and I felt the silence between us so heavy it could crush my chest. Kieran looked at me. I looked back. No one said anything, and it was in those moments that I began to understand. We weren't not in love. We were just choosing silence instead of the truth. After a while, I realized Kieran didn't enter my life in a noisy way. He didn't burst through the door, didn't take over. Kieran slipped into my world slowly, lightly, as if moving too fast would scare us both into running away. We started having shared routines. Mondays and Wednesdays in class together. Fridays meeting at the coffee shop near the library. Late-night study sessions stretching into the night, when most of the dorm had turned off the lights and only sparse footsteps echoed in the hallway. Kieran would often sit across from me, his lightly tattooed arm on the table, pen in hand but eyes not always on the book. "I don't get this subject," he said, his voice deep, a bit hoarse from fatigue. "I thought engineering majors were good at everything," I teased, trying to keep the mood light. Kieran smirked, a small, rare smile. "Not everything." In moments like that, I wanted to ask, what isn't everything? But I didn't ask. Silence gradually became our shared language. One rainy evening, Kieran suggested I come to his apartment to study. The dorm was too noisy. I didn't object. I remember clearly the moment I stepped into Kieran's personal space. A small, tidy room smelling of soap and old paper. On the bookshelf were engineering books mixed with a few novels I didn't expect him to read. "You like reading these?" I asked, picking up a worn paperback. Kieran looked a bit embarrassed. "Yeah, when I need to escape my own head." I looked at him longer than necessary. There was something very fragile in that statement, as if Kieran had accidentally revealed a part he always kept hidden. We studied on the floor, leaning against the sofa. The distance between us was closer than I thought. I could feel his warmth, his steady breathing, the familiar scent of laundry detergent. When I leaned down to pick up a dropped pen, my arm brushed against Kieran's. Just a light touch, but my body reacted immediately, heart pounding, breath catching for a second too long. Kieran stiffened too. We looked at each other. Neither pulled away first. Time stretched out then. I didn't know what I was waiting for. An apology, a laugh it off, or a move to break the fragile boundary between us. Finally, Kieran was the one to pull his hand back. "Sorry," he said quickly, his voice lower than usual. "No problem," I replied, so fast it sounded like I was convincing myself. But from that moment, I couldn't go back to the old state anymore. I started noticing every little detail about Kieran. The way he furrowed his brow when concentrating. The way he bit his lip when thinking. The way he avoided my eyes whenever the conversation accidentally touched on romance. Once, while we were having dinner at our usual spot, the table next to us was loud with students talking about their partners, sex, things they'd tried. I saw Kieran tense up. "You okay?" I asked. Kieran was silent for a long time. Then he nodded slightly. "Yeah, I don't like those kinds of conversations." I wanted to ask, why? But I didn't, because I was afraid of the answer. Afraid that if Kieran spoke the truth, I couldn't pretend anymore that what I felt was just friendship. And maybe I was also afraid that his truth would reflect my own. That night, lying alone in my room, I realized I was waiting for a message from Kieran. Not because there was something to say, just to make sure the fragile thread between us was still there. The message came near midnight. "Kieran, Zane, you still up?" I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "Me, yeah." The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, Kieran sent a single line. "Kieran, if one day I say something I've never said to anyone, do you think I'd lose you?" I sat up, heart pounding. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I couldn't type a word. I knew very clearly that this was a branching moment. An honest answer could break everything. A safe answer could keep things intact, at least on the surface. In the end, I chose the easiest way. "Me, you won't lose me." That wasn't the truth, but it was what Kieran needed to hear. And it was also the moment we both stepped deeper into the zone of silence, where no one gets rejected, but no one gets loved fully either. After that late-night message, something changed between me and Kieran. Not the distance, but the awareness. We still met, still studied together, still sat next to each other in the library like familiar puzzle pieces. But now, every glance carried an unspoken question. Every silence had weight. I started noticing that Kieran avoided talking about the future. He didn't mention summer break, didn't talk about post-graduation plans like other students. As if his life only existed in the present, in the brief moments when we were together. One Friday evening, Kieran came to my room later than usual. The hallway was already empty. The vending machine hummed at the end of the corridor. "You okay?" I asked when I saw him standing at the door, shoulders slightly slumped. "Maybe. I just need to be here for a bit," Kieran said. "If that's not a bother." I stepped aside to let him in. There was no particular reason for the silence that followed. We didn't study, didn't play music, just sat on my bed, backs against the wall, each lost in thought. Kieran took off his shoes, rubbed his face with both hands. "Zane," he said, voice hoarse, "have you ever felt like you're about to do something, and once you do, you can't go back?" That question sent a chill down my spine. "I think everyone has something like that," I replied, though my heart was pounding. Kieran turned to look at me. This time, his gaze didn't avoid mine. I think that's happening to me. The air between us thickened. I could hear his breathing. Close. Too close. I didn't pull away. Kieran raised his hand, pausing in midair, as if asking permission silently. I said nothing, just looked at him. That hand touched my wrist. Lightly, slowly, but enough for my whole body to react like an electric shock. I swallowed hard, feeling my skin heat up at the contact. Zane, Kieran whispered. If I'm wrong, tell me. I should have said stop, but I didn't. Kieran slid his hand up, fingers interlacing with mine. For the first time, we held hands truly. No disguise, no accident, no excuse. I looked down at our intertwined hands. Something inside me broke very softly. What are we doing? I asked, voice uncertain. Kieran smiled sadly. I'm trying to figure that out too. He leaned closer, close enough that I could feel his warm breath on my lips. I closed my eyes, not out of certainty, but because I didn't have the courage to face what was about to happen. Kieran's lips brushed the corner of mine. Not quite a kiss, just a fragile, trembling test, as if we were both waiting for the other to pull back. I didn't pull back, but right then, Kieran's phone buzzed. The sharp sound shattered the moment. Kieran startled, releasing my hand like he'd touched fire. He stood up abruptly, breathing heavily. Sorry, he said, not looking at me. I shouldn't have. Kieran, I called, but he had already turned away. He grabbed his phone, glancing quickly at the screen. I didn't see the caller's name, just saw Kieran's face pale for a very brief second. I have to go, he said. Right now. Is something wrong? I asked. Kieran shook his head. Not your business. That hurt more than I expected. He put on his shoes, opened the door, then paused, without turning back. Zane, Kieran said softly. What just happened? Please forget it. The door closed. I sat motionless on the bed for a long time, my hand still feeling the warmth where Kieran had held it. I knew, from that moment, everything had changed. We had touched the truth. And then, like two cowards, we both retreated. In the days that followed, Kieran disappeared from our shared routines. No coffee, no library, no late-night messages. In class, he sat far from me, not out of hatred, but out of fear. I understood that. Sadly, I understood it all too well, because I was doing the same, pretending that if we stayed silent long enough, that moment would never have existed. But some things, once touched, can't be pretended away, and I began to sense that this silence would soon demand a price. Kieran avoided me for nearly 2 weeks. Not the obvious kind of avoidance, but a calculated disappearance. He still came to class, still sat there, still took notes, just no longer looking my way. No more unconscious glances seeking me in the crowd. No more messages asking if I'd eaten, if I'd slept. We became strangers, even in the same lecture hall. At first, I tried to convince myself it was necessary, that Kieran needed space, that we just needed time for things to settle. But the truth is, silence doesn't make things disappear. It just changes their shape. The rumor started from a stupid place, social media. A hastily taken photo from a weekend party. Kieran standing next to a blonde girl, his hand on her back, dim lights, ambiguous angle. No kiss. Nothing too clear, but enough for others to fill in the blanks. You see? A friend asked me while scrolling on their phone. That's Kieran. Looks serious. I smiled. Perfect smile. Yeah, they look good together. I hated myself right then. I had no right to be jealous. No right to hurt. No right to ask. Because I'd never dared to claim that place in his life. But that night I couldn't sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling, hand gripping my phone, opening and closing our last messages. No conversation ended clearly, just a string of sentences cut off by fear. A few days later, we were forced to talk. Group project. The professor assigned us to the same group like a cruel joke of fate. When Kieran's name was read next to mine, I heard my heart beat clearly. We met in a small study room on the 3rd floor of the library. Glass doors, white cold lights, the space too bright to hide anything. Hi, Kieran said, voice polite to the point of strangeness.
Y raplia.
We talked about the assignment, deadlines, materials to read. Everything smooth, too smooth. Like two people who'd rehearsed in the mirror how to become strangers. Finally, when the others left, it was just us. The air grew heavy immediately. How have you been? I asked, hating myself for the cliché question. Kieran didn't look at me. Fine. One word. Decisive. I saw the photo, I said, though I'd sworn to myself not to mention it. Kieran paused. What photo? The girl. Silence. Then Kieran sighed, as if finally releasing a burden. Her name's Maya. We're trying to get to know each other. I nodded. Felt like someone was squeezing my chest. I'm happy for you. Kieran laughed. A short, bitter laugh. Don't what? Don't say that to me, Zane. You know it's not true. I looked straight at him. So what's true? Kieran finally turned to me. His eyes were tired, cracked. Not like someone starting a new relationship. The truth, Kieran said slowly, is I need a reason not to think about you. That hit me without warning. And is it working? I asked, voice hoarse. Kieran shook his head.
No.
We stood there, so close, so far. Why didn't you say it? I asked, almost whispering. That day in my room. Because I'm scared, Kieran interrupted. Because if I say it, it becomes real. And if it's real, I don't know if I have the courage to live with it. I understood. I hated that I understood. So what about me? I asked. Do you think I'm not scared? Kieran looked at me for a long time. Then he said the thing that hurt the most. I think you're better at pretending than I am. Maybe he was right. We didn't argue. No climax. Just a fragmented conversation, leaving more questions than answers. When Kieran left, I sat alone in that glass room, realizing a cruel truth. We didn't break up. We never officially started. And that's what made it hurt so much. After that conversation, I couldn't pretend everything was fine anymore. I still went to class, still submitted assignments on time, still smiled at friends when they told stories unrelated to me. But something inside me had shifted, like a broken bone not set properly. Every time I saw Kieran from afar, my heart reacted before my brain could think. I hated myself for that. Hated how I still unconsciously searched for him in crowds, knowing that gaze would never return like before. I started avoiding places where I might run into Kieran. The coffee shop, the third floor of the library, the short path back to the dorm we used to walk together. But avoidance didn't make the longing disappear. It only made it grow. There were nights I dreamed of him. Not clear or provocative dreams. Just Kieran sitting next to me, shoulder to shoulder, silent. And in the dream, that silence didn't hurt. It was safe. When I woke, it took a few seconds to remember we'd ruined it ourselves. I started wondering, what if I'd said something different that day? If I'd pulled him back when he tried to leave the room? If I'd kissed him before the phone rang? Questions without answers are the cruelest. One evening, I ran into Maya by chance. Not on purpose. She was sitting at the next table in the library, talking quietly on the phone. I recognized her by her laugh, bright, easy, without fear. When she hung up, our eyes met. I knew she recognized me. You're Zane, right? She asked, smiling. I nodded. Yeah. I'm Maya, she said. Kieran mentioned you. My heart tightened. Really? Yeah, she replied without hesitation. You're his close friend. Those two words hung between us like a verdict. I don't mean to pry, Maya continued, her voice gentle. But, are you okay? I almost laughed. Okay. If I answered honestly, she might not know how to react. I'm fine, I said, like a habit ingrained in my body. Maya looked at me for a long time. You sound like Kieran. That made me breathless for a second. He always says he's fine too, she went on, even when he's clearly not. I didn't know what I expected from that conversation. Confirmation, an apology, or just proof that I hadn't imagined everything. Is Kieran happy? I asked, voice so low it was almost inaudible. Maya was silent. Then she shook her head. I think he's trying. Trying. A word too familiar. That night, I drank more than usual at a department party. Loud music. Flashing lights. Young bodies bumping into each other without thought. I laughed louder than necessary, talked more than I wanted, and in a stupid moment, I kissed a stranger just to prove to myself that I could. But when their lips left mine, all I felt was emptiness. I left the party early, walking alone through the darkened campus. The night wind cut like knives. I pulled out my phone, the one I'd tried not to touch for weeks. Kieran's name was still there. I texted before I could think. Me, what are we doing to ourselves? 3 minutes passed. 5, 10. Then the screen lit up. Kieran. I don't know. I sat on the steps in front of the library, exhaustion rising to my bones. Me, I'm tired of pretending. Took a long time for Kieran to reply. Kieran, me too. That was the first time after everything we admitted the same thing.
No apologies. No promises.
Just two people acknowledging that silence hadn't saved anyone. And in that moment I understood that the truth, even if painful, was starting to knock. We agreed to meet on a Sunday afternoon, when the campus was strangely quiet. Most students had gone home or were busy with their own lives. Only the tree-shaded paths remained, a few bikes leaning, and the feeling that the world was giving us a rare space to breathe. Kieran chose to meet at the back courtyard of the science building, a place few people passed, not tied to any shared memories of ours. I understood the choice. He didn't want memories intruding on this conversation. When I arrived, Kieran was already there. Hands in his coat pockets, shoulders slightly tense, as if bracing for impact. Thanks for coming, he said. You texted, I came, I replied. We stood facing each other, not too close, not too far. A carefully calculated distance, enough not to touch, but not to pretend strangeness. I've thought a lot, Kieran began, eyes on the concrete. About you, about us, about everything. I nodded. Me too. And, Kieran asked, finally looking up at me. I took a deep breath. And I realized silence doesn't make me feel as safe as I thought. It just makes me feel alone. Kieran closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they were redder than before. I don't want to hurt you, he said. But I also don't know how to live truthfully without ruining everything. What's everything here? I asked, voice light but direct. The life I have, Kieran replied. My family, their expectations, how they see me. I was silent. I'd guessed, but hearing him say it still weighed on me. I'm not like you, Kieran continued. You seem more comfortable with yourself. I smiled faintly. You only see the part one let others see. Kieran looked at me intently, as if realizing it for the first time. So what's your truth? That question hung between us, raw and dangerous. My truth, I said slowly, is I've fallen for you a long time ago, before I even allowed myself to name it. No lightning strike, no dramatic music, just the wind through the trees and Kieran's ragged breath. He turned his face away, hand covering his mouth, as if holding back something about to spill. I wish you hadn't said that, Kieran said softly. I wish too, I replied. But I'm tired of pretending it's not. Kieran turned back to me. Do you know what that makes me want to do? I shook my head. It makes me want to admit I feel the same, he said, voice trembling. But at the same time, it scares me enough to want to run. My heart pounded painfully. So what are you choosing? I asked. Kieran was silent for a long time. Then he shook his head. I don't know. That answer, strangely, didn't disappoint me as much as I thought. At least this time he wasn't pretending. I don't need you to choose right now, I said. I just need you not to deny what's there. Kieran stepped closer to me. A small step, but enough for me to feel his presence. I'm not denying, he said. I'm just not brave enough yet. We stood there, close enough that if one of us moved, everything would cross the final safe boundary. Kieran raised his hand, touching my cheek, this time without hesitation, without permission. Zane, he whispered. If I kiss you, I won't be able to go back to being the person everyone expects. I placed my hand on his wrist, holding it, not pushing away, not pulling in. If you kiss me, I said, I won't be able to keep pretending this doesn't matter. We looked at each other for a long time. Finally, Kieran lowered his hand.
No kiss.
But no more denial. Give me more time, he said. This time. Really? I nodded. But don't turn time into silence. Kieran nodded back. When he left, I didn't feel the loss like before. Just a simmering worry that the truth had been named, and sooner or later, it would demand a price. The truth doesn't wait for anyone to be ready. I learned that on a Tuesday morning, when my name appeared in a conversation I was never invited to. A message from a classmate. Zane, you okay? I looked at the screen, unease rising fast. What's up? I replied. 3 dots. Then a screenshot was sent. It was an anonymous post on the school's student forum. No names. No clear evidence. Just lines written vaguely enough not to be refuted, and specific enough for everyone to know who it was about. Anyone else find it funny that an engineering student, dating a girl, but spends most of his time with another guy? Not judging, just curious. But if the truth is the truth, pretending just hurts more people. I read it over and over. Each time my chest tightened more. My name wasn't mentioned, but everyone knew. Within hours the looks changed. Not hateful looks, but probing ones. Whispers. Prolonged silences when I entered a room. I didn't seek out Kieran right away. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew, if it had reached this point, he was panicking more than I was. Kieran didn't come to class that day. Didn't reply to messages. Didn't pick up calls. By afternoon, I decided to drive to his apartment. The door wasn't locked. Kieran was sitting on the sofa, hunched over, hands holding his head. Phone tossed on the table, screen lit with dozens of unread notifications. Zane, he said when he saw me, voice thick. I don't know what to do. I stood there, looking at the boy I loved. Not in some romantic moment, but in his rawest collapse. You don't have to do anything right now, I said. But you can't keep hiding. Kieran laughed, a shattered laugh. You think I'm hiding because I want to? I know, I said. But this time, silence. It won't protect you anymore. Kieran looked at me, eyes red-rimmed. My family called. Maya too. Everyone asking the same question. I'm not ready, he whispered. I've never said it to anyone. I stepped closer, sat across from him. Kieran, I don't need you to come out for me. I just need you not to deny what's between us. But if I admit that, he said, voice breaking, I'll lose the version of life I was taught is right. I was silent, because I knew some things love can't replace. So what about me? I asked very softly. Kieran closed his eyes. When he opened them, his gaze hurt so much I couldn't look long. I don't want to lose you, he said. But I don't know how to keep you without losing myself. That was a precise knife. I stood up. I think, I said slowly, we've reached the point where silence isn't a shared choice anymore. Kieran looked up. What are you saying? I can't stay here, I said. Not because I don't love you, but because I can't be your secret forever. Kieran stood abruptly. Zane, don't. I'm not forcing you, I interrupted. I'm just choosing not to hurt myself more. We stood facing each other, the distance widening in a way that couldn't be bridged. If one day, I said, you're ready to live truthfully, not perfect, not standard, I'll be there. But I can't wait in limbo forever. Kieran trembled. Are you saying goodbye? I shook my head. I'm saying honesty. I left before he could say more. Outside it started raining. Not heavy, but cold enough to seep deep. In the car, my hands shook on the wheel. I knew I'd done the right thing. But the right thing never feels easy. And deep down, I still feared one thing. That when Kieran was brave enough to choose the truth, I might not be there anymore. After that day, my life slowed in a very strange way. Not because there was nothing to do, but because I no longer expected anything to happen. I still woke up each morning, went to class, submitted work, live the rhythm of a third-year college student in America. But inside, something had been set down. No more vague hopes. No more what-ifs. Kieran kept his word. He didn't seek me out. Didn't text. Didn't show up where I frequented. Didn't try to explain. Didn't cling with promises he wasn't sure he could keep. And strangely, I was grateful for that. The student forum quickly moved to a new topic. The rumor faded as it appeared, no apologies, no accountability. Maya took a break from school, then returned, looking more tired, quieter. We ran into each other a few times, nodded like two people sharing a pain but not needing to name it. Kieran and I didn't talk anymore, until one evening at the end of the semester. That day I was in the library late. It had turned to winter. Outside the glass, light snow fell. The kind not thick enough to stop everything, but enough to remind you time was passing. I was packing my books when I saw him. Kieran standing at the entrance, dark coat, hair shorter than before. He'd lost weight. Not much, but enough for me to notice. We looked at each other for a long time.
No surprise. No panic.
Just two people who were once very close, now standing on different sides of a decision. "Can I sit?" Kieran asked, pointing to the chair across. I nodded. We sat, silent, but not as heavy as before. "I told my family," Kieran said, no beating around. "Not everything, but enough." I breathed slowly. "And not easy," he smiled sadly. "But I'm still standing here." I looked at him, feeling both proud and pained. "I'm not here to ask you back," Kieran continued, as if reading my mind. "I just don't want our story to end in total silence." I nodded. "Me neither." "Zane," Kieran said softly, "I love you." That came late, but it wasn't meaningless. I didn't turn away, didn't avoid. I let it touch me, like a final truth spoken right. "I know," I replied, "and I loved you." Kieran looked at me, eyes wet but calmer than I'd ever seen. "I wish I'd been braver sooner." "I wish too," I said. "But if we went back, we'd probably still choose silence." Kieran was silent, then nodded. "Maybe," he said. "Sometimes people don't lose each other because they don't love, but because they're not ready to live truthfully yet." We sat a bit longer. No holding hands.
No kiss.
No trying to pull the past back. When standing, Kieran looked at me one last time. "Thank you," he said, "for not making me the villain in this story." I smiled. "You never were." We left the library in different directions, without looking back. Years later, when I think of Kieran, it no longer stings. Just a settled feeling, like remembering an old song that was once very important,